at this moment, I would like to come and welcome our Congressman, Congressman Jim McGovern. Welcome to IFPRI. Welcome to this wonderful event here. And we are very much looking forward to your remarks. But let me briefly introduce you to this global audience we have through live stream and through the video. Congressman McGovern is with the 2nd District of Massachusetts. He's the founder and co-chair of the House Hunger Caucus. He's also a ranking member on the House Subcommittee on Nutrition, where you advocate tirelessly for funding programs that help working families, children, and the elderly put food on the tables when times are tough. You have also authored the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition Program, which provides school-based meals for millions of children in some of the world's poorest countries. Your heart is with nutrition, your heart is with hunger, and it is a great privilege for us to have you here with us to share some of your reflections on the report and how we can continue to support the fight against hunger. Thank you very much. We invite you to the podium.
Okay, thank you, and it's really an honor to be here today. I want to thank the International Food Policy Research Institute for hosting and coordinating this event. I'm grateful to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN for once again researching and producing this important report. I'm grateful to the World Food Program for all they do to coordinate and respond to humanitarian crises all around the world. I'm grateful to all the panelists for their important contributions and advocacy to ending hunger and food insecurity, and to advancing health and nutrition around the world and here at home. And of all the people you're going to hear from today, or you heard from today, I'm probably the least kind of informed and qualified person to be addressing this group, but it really is an honor. You know, as part of the introduction, a reference was made to the fact that I'm the author of the George McGovern Robert Dole International Food for Education Program. So a lot of people think that I'm George McGovern's son. And so people always say to me, you know, I'm a big supporter of your dad's. And they always seem a little bit shocked when I say that, thank you, my dad owns a liquor store in Massachusetts, and I hope you'll keep supporting him. But much of my advocacy really was generated when I was, because of George McGovern, who I interned for when I was in college, and I will always be grateful for that friendship, but also for what he has done in the area of food and nutrition here at home and around the world. You know, I remember last year when the UN High Commissioner for Refugees issued its report that the world is seeing the greatest number of refugees and displaced persons since World War II. And that this increase in homeless and stateless people was due largely to conflict, natural disasters, and climate change. That was a disturbing wake-up call for all of us, that something deeply disturbing is happening in this world, and that we, in the international community, we need to respond. It should have been a clarion call for action. So while the conclusions of the FAO's 2017 report are shocking and discouraging, they are not really a surprise. More people were hungry and food insecure in 2016, due largely to war and conflict, natural disasters, and climate change. I hope the bells are clanging in all the world's capitals, including here in Washington, D.C., because this is not a time to wring our hands. This is a time for concerted and coordinated action. The 4 famines that have gained so much attention, not just in government and humanitarian circles, but also in the press and with the public, famines in South Sudan, Nigeria, Yemen, and Somalia, are perhaps more than the canaries in the coal mine. They are harbingers of how conflict and climate change can wreak devastation on local populations, and how each exacerbates the other. We are well aware that war and conflict can result in hunger, food insecurity, the loss of livelihoods, and displacement. What we also know is that hunger and food insecurity, whether from natural disaster or climate change, contribute to economic, social, and political instability. These can often erupt or exacerbate local conflict or state repression, inflame long-simmering prejudices and grievances between rival ethnic, religious, or minority groups, and even erupt into full-scale civil conflict. These are vicious forces that can tear families, communities, nations, and regions apart, and set back development for decades. I think our panelists today have described well the consequences of increased hunger and food insecurity and why it's so important that there is a concerted effort to respond to these crises and strengthen efforts to promote agricultural development and sustainable food systems, including within shifting climate patterns, and ensure that nutrition is fully incorporated into all hunger, food security, and health programs, especially for our youngest children. So you can understand why I'm concerned right now, determined, but in all honesty, scared that just as need is on the rise, political will is failing. Now, it's not failing everywhere. As most of you know, when the House of Representatives put together the FY 2017 Omnibus Appropriations Bill this past spring, we included over $900 million in emergency humanitarian aid for the 4 famine countries. And we provided those emergency funds not just to meet the needs of those 4 countries, but to make sure that the already budgeted funds for existing global needs were not robbed of resources, so that programs in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere would be maintained. But we're still faced with the president's budget. And yesterday we just debated on the House floor the Republican budget resolution that made draconian cuts to our food aid, humanitarian, agricultural development, nutrition, health, and other economic and diplomatic programs. Now, right now, the House and especially the Senate Appropriations Committees are resisting those cuts. But over the course of 2, 3, and 4 years, it will get harder and harder for them to find the money to sustain these life-saving and essential programs. We're likely to cut even more deeply programs here in the United States that reduce hunger and address food insecurity. So even here in the United States, we might see hunger increase, and the sad statistics reflected in this report. Again, in that Republican budget that we debated yesterday, there was a proposal to cut SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program, which used to be known as food stamps, by $164 billion. And so I think it's more important than ever, perhaps the most important moment in my time in public service, that advocacy groups in the United States and around the world come together to press their governments to address these crises, to increase funds, to increase programs that expand sustainable, nutritious, local, and regional agriculture and development. But to strengthen local and regional markets for agricultural products, to strengthen and value the role of small farmers everywhere, especially women, to prioritize child and infant nutrition programs, to do more and to do it better, and not just on food and agriculture, but on forcefully addressing how to end conflicts that drive people to desperation, and to adapt better to a changing climate and more extreme weather. You know, there's a lot of fear and prejudice out there that together we all need to overcome. There's a lot of what's called donor fatigue, in part because the problems don't seem to end or improve, and they just seem to keep coming at us wave after wave after wave. But we cannot afford to lose our humanity or our will, or forget that in times past we have been able to catch those waves and successfully ride them safely to shore. You know, I'm reminded that today, I don't know how many of you know this, but today, October 5th, is the day of the harvest moon. Now, the harvest moon is a matter of astronomy and orbits, but its name comes from the fact that the moon is so quick to rise and so full and bright that farmers can spend an extra couple of hours working their fields and bringing in the harvest. We all need to act as if there is always a harvest moon shining over us, that we always have those extra couple of hours to do whatever it takes to make sure that harvest is gathered, and that we share it with our neighbors when their cupboards are bare. If we show that the same political commitment that farmers show to their fields, then maybe we'll see the current trend reverse again, and fewer people will be hungry and food insecure by 2018. Let me just conclude with this observation. I believe that hunger really is a political condition. I mean, we can solve this, and we can meet the needs of the global community, but it requires the political will. And, you know, when we're up against a lot of cynicism, not only in Washington, but in other capitals around the world, where people are wondering whether or not all this is worth it, whether or not it really makes a difference. And I think, you know, you all know that it does, and partly because you have seen some of the success stories up close and personal. And I think one of the things we all need to do better is we need to talk about those success stories. We need to show people that there's a human face that's involved with these challenges. You know, we're so inundated with statistics and facts and figures that I think sometimes we've lost our human ability to feel them. I mean, when you say, for example, like I did yesterday on the House floor, that there's 42 million Americans that are hungry in this country, you know, I'm not sure it resonates as much as opposed to me telling the story of one child who goes to school every day hungry, and how he can't learn, and how it has impacted his health, and how it has impacted his future. And so whether it's about individual programs or individual stories of people who are facing the most terrible situations around the world, it is important that when we communicate with people in my business, politicians, that we tell those stories. Because I think at the end of the day, you know, all of us have one thing in common here, and that is we're human beings. And our hearts can be touched, and we can be moved to action by stories, by examples. And so, you know, I'm trying, when I talk about issues of food insecurity and some of these struggles of hunger all around the world and here at home, I'm now spending more time telling stories. Because we need to figure out a way to move the politics, not only here in this country, but around the world. These are serious, serious big issues that we're faced with. And by the way, the impact of climate change, we're just seeing the beginning of it. And these storms that we have just seen hit our shores here in the United States, that's the beginning. That's not the end, it's the beginning of what we're going to see in the future. And they're so devastating, but we can't forget the people. And so I appreciate the dedication of everybody in this audience, and I believe that hunger is a political condition. I think if we have the political will, we can solve it. And I look forward to working with you to making sure that we rise to the occasion. So thank you for having me here.